Hello, my dear students. Have you ever stopped to wonder what is the actual difference between a flickering flame, a rolling stone, and a growing tree? In biology, we ask one of the most important questions of all: what actually makes something alive? At first glance, the answer seems easy. We know that animals, plants, and even tiny bacteria are alive. But if you look closer, they all look so different. So, what exactly do they have in common? Biologists have found the answer by identifying a specific set of characteristics that every single living thing shares. It does not matter if the organism is a tiny single cell like a bacterium or a large complex living thing like a human, a tall tree, or an animal. So, how do we actually categorize life? Biologists use a list of 7 key characteristics that all living organisms show. To make this easy to remember, we will use a simple mnemonic called Mrs. GREN. So students, think of Mrs. GREN as a secret code where each letter stands for one vital process. Let's break it down. M is for movement, R is for respiration, S is for sensitivity, G is for growth, R is for reproduction, E is for excretion, and N is for nutrition. Using a structure like this helps us organize everything we know about biology into one memorable package. Now, we are not just going to look at these as simple definitions. We are going to see them as active biological processes that happen inside every living system. Let's start with the first one, letter M, for movement. In biology, movement is more than just running or flying. We define movement as any action by an organism that causes a change in its position or place. In simple terms, it is the ability to move from one location to another, or even just to move parts of the body. Think about the difference here. Animals like humans or birds can move their entire bodies from one spot to another. We call this locomotion. Plants, on the other hand, stay rooted in one spot, but they still move. Think of a sunflower turning its face toward the light. We call that as phototropism, or roots pushing deeper into the soil. That is geotropism. Even tiny single-celled organisms move. They use microscopic structures with cool names like cilia, flagella, or pseudopodia. So remember, movement does not always mean traveling. It can simply be a change in the position of a leaf or a limb. Now let's move to the next letter, R, and talk about how organisms get their energy. So next up is the first R in Mrs. Gren, which stands for respiration. Think of this as the power plant of the cell. Respiration is a series of chemical reactions that happen inside every single cell. Its job is to break down nutrient molecules like the sugar from the food we eat, and we release energy. This energy is the fuel for everything else we do. Without it, we could not move, grow, or even move tiny molecules around our bodies. Now, while most organisms need oxygen to make this happen, some tiny microorganisms can actually release energy without any oxygen at all. Here is a very important tip for your exams. You should not be confused about in between respiration and breathing. These two are different functions. Breathing is just the physical act of your lungs taking in air, while respiration is a chemical process happening deep inside your cells to create energy. So breathing gets the oxygen in, but respiration is what actually uses it. Now that We have our energy. Let's see how living things react to the world around them with our next letter S. That is for sensitivity. This is basically the body's radar system. Sensitivity is the ability of an organism to detect and respond to changes in its environment. We call these changes stimuli. Think of stimuli as signals from the world. They can be external, like a bright light, a cold breeze, or a sharp touch. For example, if you accidentally touch a hot stove, your body detects that heat and you immediately pull your hand away to stay safe. But stimuli can also be internal, happening deep inside you, like your body noticing a change in your blood sugar levels. Plants are also sensitive. They respond to light by slowly growing toward it so they can catch as much energy as possible. This ability to sense and react is what allows living things to survive in a changing world. So, sensitivity keeps us safe and fed. But what happens after an organism has its energy and is responding to the world? It starts to get bigger. So, let's look at our next letter G, that is for growth. In biology, growth is about more than just getting taller. It is a permanent transformation. So here we define growth as a permanent increase in size. To be very precise, biologists look for an increase in dry mass. This happens in two ways. Either the cells themselves get bigger or the number of cells increases. So let's look at the difference. In single-celled organisms like bacteria, growth is just one tiny cell getting larger before it splits in two. But in multicellular organisms like you, me, plants, and animals, growth involves making millions of new cells. This makes the body larger and more complex over time. The most important thing to remember is that true biological growth is irreversible. It is not like a balloon that you can blow up and then shrink back down. It is a lasting change. Now that an organism has grown and matured, it eventually reaches the stage where it can create new life. So let's look at our second R in our list. This R is for reproduction. First R is for respiration and second R is for reproduction. This is how life ensures that it does not just stop with one individual but continues for generations. Reproduction is the process where organisms produce more individuals of the same kind. Without it, a species would eventually disappear. But how does that happen? For single-celled organisms like bacteria, it is very straightforward. One cell simply divides into two, while for multicellular organisms, it can happen in two main ways. First, there is sexual reproduction. This involves the fusion of gametes, which are special sex cells. And second, there is a asexual production. This is where one parent produces offspring that are genetically identical to itself, like natural biological clones. Whether it is a tiny bacterium or a giant whale, reproduction is essential for the survival of the species over time. So life moves, breathes, grows, and reproduces. But all that activity creates waste. So let's look at the letter E, which stands for excretion. Think of this as the body's essential waste management system. Every living cell is like a tiny busy factory. All the chemical reactions happening inside, which we call metabolism, that produce waste. For example, when your cells perform respiration to make energy, they produce carbon dioxide. Other reactions produce urea or other toxic compounds. If these compounds stayed in your body, they would build up to harmful levels. So here the excretion Excretion is the process of filtering these out and removing them to keep you healthy. Now, here is a key distinction for your exams. You should not get confused about excretion and egestion. Sometimes the examiners ask about such kind of differences. That can be logical question, but you should be very clear about excretion and egestion. Egestion is just getting rid of undigested food that passed through your gut. But excretion is the removal of chemical waste produced inside your cells. So excretion keeps our internal environment clean. But to keep those cellular factories running in the first place, we need raw materials. That brings us to our final letter N, that is nutrition. Remember, if respiration is the power plant, then nutrition is the delivery of the raw fuel. Nutrition is the process by which organisms take in the materials they need for energy, growth, and development. But now, but remember that not every living thing eats the same way. Let's look at two main groups, which are autotrophs and heterotrophs. Plants are what we call autotrophs. This means they self-feed. They take in light, carbon dioxide, water, and minerals to make their own food through photosynthesis. But animals, those are heterotrophs, like us. We cannot make our own food. So we have to get our organic compounds by eating other organisms. In a food chain, the autotrophs, like green plants, are always at the start. Heterotrophs, like us, are the consumers. And do not forget about fungi. They have a unique way of getting nutrition by digesting food outside their bodies and then absorbing the nutrients. We shall study these functions in detail in our next lectures. Here is just the introduction of these seven characteristics of life. Here we have covered all seven characteristics. So let's do a quick recap to make sure you have mastered the word of living organisms. We have now covered the seven pillars of life. Whether an organism is a tiny unicellular bacterium or a massive multicellular animal, plant, or a tree, it must exhibit these seven characteristics to be considered truly alive. Let's do one last quick check for our Mrs. Grand list. That is movement, respiration, sensitivity, growth, reproduction, excretion, and finally the nutrition. Together, these characteristics define the very essence of life. This framework is fundamental to biology because it gives us a clear rule book to distinguish living organisms from non-living matter. Understanding these seven traits is just the beginning. They are the foundation for everything else we will study, from how cells are built to how we classify every creature on Earth. In our next video, we will see how these ideas connect directly to classification of organisms and how scientists group living things in a systematic way. So don't forget to like this video if it helped you understand the basics of biology. And I will see you in our next lesson. Thank you.